Max, let's actually stay in Europe because Keir Starmer gave a major speech, basically his first major speech this week, and the press came out calling it, quote, gloomy. I thought it was sort of Keir Starmer's, quote, American Carnage moment, if we think back to Donald Trump's populist first inaugural, in an inverse way, because Starmer, of course, talked about the, quote, snake oil of populism. Let's put this unheard article by Adrian Pabst on the screen. This was a fantastic take. Pabst writes, the public has a sense that the roots of our national woes go much deeper, more than 40 years of a broken economic and social settlement, which we owe to Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, as well as their heirs Gordon Brown, David Cameron, and Rishi Sunak. Now, from your vantage point, actually in the UK, how did this sort of anti-populist but anti-Tory establishment speech play out? And what does it mean for how Starmer and his allies hope to play politics in the next year or so?
Quite simply, an effective leader in the modern age with all the media appearances and scrutiny must have a level of charisma. And Starmer's team really wanted to show this on the campaign trail with his rolled up shirt sleeves and a beaming smile. And things were easy, although he always did try to show the Labour government was going to take its job seriously. Now in government, the tone is much starker, it's much more serious, and it was clear in this speech that in the Rose Garden at number 10 on Tuesday, he used the location, the Rose Garden at number 10, to bash the Conservative Party by saying they had their illegal lockdown drinks here, and some felt pangs of hypocrisy about that because last week, Labour has become embroiled in a cronyism scandal, and many appointments to the supposedly neutral civil service have been viewed as intentionally political. And yes, Starmer warned the country how grave the issues are, but interestingly, a lot of commentators and journalists say that politicians must tell more hard truths. They ought to level with us, the people, more often. And fair enough. Yet, somewhat predictably, the response was terrible. It said he should cheer up, he's too gloomy. And some, on the other hand, said it was savvy politics from Starmer to prepare the ground for higher taxes and fiscal pain, if you remember during the campaign. The Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said the phrase bedrock of fiscal responsibility more times than anyone could count. As we may have predicted after years of stagnant growth, the UK is going to go through some hard times.
Well, and a lot of Western countries are grappling with ascendant populism, including, obviously, the UK. He was speaking gloomily in the aftermath, probably most notably, of the Southport tragedy and what ensued as a result of it. And then the resulting controversies involving speech and all of that, it, to me, just called to mind, because I was at the DNC for Undercurrents last week, it called to mind thinking about how Kamala Harris is taking on right-wing populism with the exact opposite of gloominess. She has been talking over and over again about joy. She has been embracing, to some extent, seriously economic populism, sort of left economic populism, rather than giving anybody hard truths. She's doing quite the opposite. She's saying we are joyful and we are going to be more generous. We are not sort of conditioning anyone or priming anybody for stinginess, tax hikes, the tough road ahead. And that sort of difference, I thought that was fascinating, Max. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it's a totally different approach.
It is a totally different approach. It's in some way expected that Britain might be a bit more gloomier than you in the US. we seem to be a bit more biting and cutting and ironic.
You get more
in
rain.
Some way.
Yeah.
We get a lot more rain. It's hard to be happier here. But some have been shocked at how quickly a populist outburst happened and after Labour gained power. But the trend towards political distrust of politicians and elites it's become worse since Brexit. That so-called populist revolt never actually manifested in a way that people seem to be happy with. And at least the US has been able to posit what seems like impressive growth numbers since COVID. But it seems unlikely that British populism will be going anywhere anytime soon.
Let's also talk about this take in the New Statesman where an essay said, quote, "There's a fine line between toxifying the Tories and making yourself look powerless." Just quickly, Max, do you think that's what Starmer did? Do you think that's it beyond looking powerless? Do you think Starmer was actually almost priming people to actually govern with this sort of being neutered as he made this gloomy pronouncement about the state of politics in the UK, or the state of government in the UK?
It's an extremely fine line between gloom and realism. And I feel that in some respects, Keir Starmer really did go extra on the gloom. He said things have to get worse before they get better. But I'm not sure how many people felt that during the speech he really gave the answers, the very specific policy measures, and even a philosophical diagnosis of what Adrian Pabst wrote from, Thatcher through Tony Blair. The economic settlement doesn't work for people. There's no grander idea of how we got here, and so I think to a lot of people, until Starmer and the Labour Party are really very clear and candid about that, then I think a lot of people feel a little bit hesitant to trust that they indeed have those answers.